My name is Arthur. I'm 25 years old, and today I can say I'm at peace with my choices. But it wasn't always this way. 3 years ago, I was just another young man trying to follow the path everyone expected of me. I was in my 6th year of engineering, with a demanding routine of internships, academic work, and expectations that never seemed to be mine. The pressure was constant and came from all sides, from the university, from my family, and especially from myself. Back then, my biggest fear was disappointing others, even if it cost me my own mental health. My life seemed to follow a straight line that didn't belong to me. I woke up early, faced crowded buses, spent the day solving calculations that left me more anxious than curious, and still had to smile at family gatherings as if everything was going well. My parents always idealized the figure of the successful engineer, the pride of the house. And me? I tried to fit into that mold, but inside, I was already cracking. Insomnia became routine, and I started having silent anxiety attacks, the kind you mask with, "I'm just tired." The final straw came one Thursday afternoon. I was at a project presentation with the most demanding professor in the course. While my classmates spoke enthusiastically about technical solutions, I felt like I was on stage, playing a role that wasn't mine. When it was my turn to speak, my voice cracked, my hands trembled. It wasn't ordinary nervousness, it was panic. After that presentation, I went straight to the bathroom and cried inside for over 20 minutes. Not out of embarrassment, but because I realized I couldn't keep pretending any longer. In the following days, the idea of abandoning everything began to make more sense than continuing to drag myself along. But the fear was enormous. How would I tell my parents? How would I face their judgments? And more, what would I do with my life without college? I had no answers, only one certainty. I couldn't live like this anymore. So I summoned up the courage. I went to my parents' living room, sat across from them, and said in the strongest voice I could muster, "I'm dropping out of college." The silence that followed was as heavy as expected. My mother cried. My father got up and left the room. For the first time, I felt like I was letting everyone down. But at the same time, I was starting to be honest with myself. After that day, the house was silent for weeks. My father barely spoke to me. My mother tried to understand, but I could see the weight of frustration in her eyes. I constantly wondered if I'd made the right choice or if I was just running away. I spent entire days locked in my room, my mind boiling with insecurity. Social media became a trigger. Seeing my classmates steadfastly pursuing their course made me feel small, behind, as if my life had gone off the rails. Still, something inside me insisted I had to keep going, even without knowing where to go. It was during this dark moment that I rediscovered an old teenage habit, a passion for building things from scratch. I'd always enjoyed taking apart electronic devices, figuring out how they worked, and creating small gadgets. I returned to tinkering with personal projects out of pure distraction. I started studying on my own, using YouTube, forums, and blogs. Soon I was developing small prototypes and even selling some online. Without realizing it, I was rediscovering my identity. The one college had extinguished. It was a spark in the darkness, and I clung to it with all my might. Over time, that passion became a routine. I created a profile on a freelance platform and began accepting small product design and simple automation jobs. At first, I earned almost nothing, but each completed project gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in a long time. There were still many doubts, especially when my parents asked if I would return to college. But something inside me was beginning to take hold. I was slowly discovering a path that made sense to me, even if it seemed invisible to others. At 26, my life still seemed disorganized to most. No diploma, no real job, no family approval. But inside, I was being reborn. Every new client, every positive feedback, every challenge I solved showed me I was capable. I began studying more deeply, investing my time in technical courses and mentoring with professionals I admired. It was still hard, very hard, but for the first time in years, I slept, feeling like I was building something of my own, something real. It was at this point that I faced one of the most challenging phases of my journey. An important client who represented more than half of my monthly income simply disappeared without paying. I was desperate. Bills were piling up, my computer was starting to malfunction, and to make matters worse, I received a message from my mother saying, "There's still time to give up this illusion and go back to college." That devastated me. I felt that no matter how hard I fought, things always returned to the same place: failure. I considered quitting. I really did. I even went to the university website to see if I could still reapply. But something inside me screamed, "You're not that Arthur who gave up on things anymore." So I decided to resist. I sold my bike to fix my computer. I asked a friend for help advertising my services in specialized groups and forums. It was during this phase that, by chance, an engineer from a major startup saw my work in a technical post and invited me for a chat. I couldn't believe it when I read the message. The conversation with the engineer was brief but decisive. He wanted me to create a prototype for an internal project, something I'd never done before, but I accepted the challenge. I spent sleepless nights studying, testing, making mistakes, and starting over. It wasn't just a job submission, it was my chance to prove I deserved to be there, even without a diploma, even without a stellar resume. When I handed over the prototype, he responded with a single sentence: "You're ready for something bigger." That made me cry. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. From then on, my life began to change. I landed more projects with the startup, was referred to other companies, and in less than 6 months, I was earning more than I would have as a newly graduated engineer. But the most important thing wasn't the money. It was the confidence I began to rebuild within myself. I still harbored insecurities, still feared failure, but each new challenge I overcame was one less obstacle in my path. I was building something with my own hands, and that was priceless. Despite my achievements, there was still an open wound: my relationship with my family. My father especially continued to believe I had thrown my life away. He rarely called me, and when he did, it was only to ask if I had returned to school yet. This hurt me more than I wanted to admit. Many nights, I considered lying, saying I had returned to college just to avoid hearing that tone of disappointment. But something inside me told me I had to stay true to my path, even if it meant disappointing expectations that were never truly mine. It was then that I had a bold idea. I would take everything I'd learned and develop my own project, something of my own with my signature. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about putting into practice everything I'd built up until that point. I spent 3 months working on an app that connected small freelance engineers with companies looking for quick, customized solutions. The idea came about because I'd experienced this exact problem: a lack of opportunities for those who are talented but lack a degree or connections. I wanted to open this door to more people like me. The process was intense. I woke up early, spent the day studying code, design, and idea validation, and at night I tested everything with potential users. These were lonely and exhausting days, but at the same time, exciting. For the first time, I felt like I was building something truly my own. No teachers, no exams, no curriculum. Just me, my vision, and my effort. When the first version was ready, I cried. Not because the app was perfect, but because it reflected everything I'd faced, from the disbelieving boy to the young man who learned to fend for himself. I launched the app with zero marketing budget, relying solely on word of mouth. And to my surprise, it began to gain traction. Within a few weeks, small engineers and technicians began signing up. Local companies began seeking solutions through the platform. It was all still very modest, but the impact was real. And for the first time, my father called me without asking about college. He had heard about the project through an acquaintance and, for the first time in years, sounded proud. The call was brief, but filled with something I hadn't heard in a long time: respect. As the platform grew, so did its challenges. I had to learn about management, accounting, negotiation, and everything no one teaches in college. I made many bad choices along the way, hired people who weren't a good fit for the project, and lost money due to lack of experience. But each setback became a learning experience. Unlike before, I no longer let myself be paralyzed by mistakes. They hurt, sure, but now I saw them as a natural part of the process. I no longer sought approval. I sought evolution. Almost 2 years after dropping out of college, a tech company approached me, interested in acquiring the platform. It was a long negotiation, full of twists and turns, but in the end, I closed the sale for a price I never imagined. It wasn't just about the money, it was about what it represented. A project born in the bedroom of a discredited guy was now being acquired by an industry giant. And that day, alone in the room where it all began, I remembered every sleepless night, every "you're wasting your life" I'd heard. And then I took a deep breath. I had won. The curious thing is that even after everything, I didn't feel angry at those who doubted me. On the contrary, it only reinforced my desire to help others who also feel lost or pressured to follow a path that doesn't match who they are. I started recording videos, sharing my journey, the failures and the lessons learned. Not as someone who has all the answers, but as someone who learned to ask the right questions. The response from the community was overwhelming. People from all over the country saying they felt inspired, that they finally saw themselves in a story. My relationship with my family also changed. Gradually, with respect and time, we began rebuilding our dialogue. My parents didn't become fans of what I do overnight, but today they understand that I'm not a reckless rebel. I'm someone who chose to forge my own path. I think that deep down, they also had to deconstruct a lot of what they believed, to be right. And that takes courage, just as it took courage for me to say no to what they expected of me. It took courage for them to see that they were wrong about who I was. Today, I look back and see that everything that seemed like the end of the world to me was, in fact, the beginning of my world. It wasn't a sudden turning point, nor a miracle. It was a process, painful, slow, full of doubts. But it was real. And that's what makes this story valuable. It's not perfect, but it's true. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that we need courage not to be heroes, but to be honest with ourselves. And that, in itself, is an act of resistance in a world that constantly tries to shape us. If you've made it this far, I can only tell you one thing. It doesn't matter where you are now. What matters is what you're willing to do from now on. Maybe you've also been told you're not good enough, that you've disappointed someone, or that you have no future. But I'm proof that no one defines your story but you. I, Arthur, 26 years old, former engineering student, discredited by many. Today, I own my own path, and for the first time I can proudly say, I am exactly who I chose to be.